When the Utah Jazz just botched this entire blow up, right? I mean, seriously, like they had multiple deals on the table that were better than the deals that they took. Obviously, the Lakers deal, right? Many people thought the Utah Jazz and Lakers were going to work out a deal. Bojan Bogdanovic, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson. Lakers were trying to get Vanderbilt or Beasley, but multiple pieces were very likely going to the Lakers. It looked like that they were approaching a deal on several occasions, but it never actually came to fruition. And then they end up trading Bojan Bogdanovic to the Detroit Pistons for a much lesser package. And then, on top of that, you had the Knicks and Donovan Mitchell, right? Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks seemed like a done deal, right? And they were going to get some nice young assets to kind of build around. They do the Donovan Mitchell deal, you do the Laker deal, you got a bunch of young players, a bunch of draft picks. You're going to be pretty bad this year, but you have a very promising future. Now, instead, what they decided to do was fleece themselves on both occasions because they didn't get a better package from the Cavs than they would have from the Knicks. And they didn't get a better package from the Pistons that they would have gotten from the Lakers, and kept all their veterans, kept pretty much most of their rotation guys, their quality rotation guys. And guess what? Now they look like a very deep team that's actually pretty decent. And instead of being a tanking team that is trying to play for Victor or Scoot, they're a team that just beat two legitimate playoff teams, and the Denver Nuggets blew them out and then beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. Utah's good. And this is something I said months ago that, like, look, if you look at Utah's roster front to back, they still have a really good team. You know, with Conley and Clarkson and Sexton and Lauri Markkanen and Vanderbilt. And I mean, they have a ton of guys in depth, and the players aren't going to be tanking, right? The whole point of a blow up rebuild is to do that, right? It's not to go and be a middle of the pack team that isn't going to get a good draft pick and, end up paying a bunch of veterans with cap space and stuff. Like, this was just terribly. Danny Ainge shot himself in the foot. And look, it's only the first two games, but they're not, the way that they are playing and the way that they are constructed, they're not going to be one of the bottom, 3 or 4 teams in the league. They're not. I don't even think they're going to be a bottom 3 or 4 team in the West, right? I mean, this team is pretty solid. They have a bunch of really quality guys. Do you know what this team reminds me of? This team reminds me of the Clippers of last season without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Like that team that, like, you looked at them and you're like, they're actually still pretty good. Like they're not a legit playoff team, not a contender or anything like that by any means, but like they're good enough to get some wins, right? And then the Clippers were like the 7 seed, and you're like, okay, like that makes sense. Like I can see that. Like I could see Utah squeezing into the play-in. That wasn't the goal. When you trade Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, like that is not the deal that you're trying to make in order to just be a play-in team. Like you're trying to tank to go get like a Victor or something along those lines, right? And it's silly to me that you blew up your roster. You traded your 2 core guys, got like some solid like rotation guys, had an opportunity to move off your veterans and just didn't. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me at all because they're going to be probably pretty decent this year. They're not going to get or at least as good of a draft pick as they could have gotten. And they're going to be in this weird purgatory stage for at least the next 2 years, if not longer. Like, it doesn't make sense. You got to pick a direction. And this was something I was saying as well, like from day one. Like the Utah Jazz need to pick a direction. Are they going to tank or are they going to rebuild? Like if you were going to do that and you were going to be a play-in team, you might as well have kept Donovan Mitchell. You might as well have, right? You might as well have traded Rudy Gobert, get all those rotation guys, get all those mid-tier guys that are actually contributing right now, and then have Donovan Mitchell and see what the team was. Like this team with Donovan Mitchell is probably at least a play-in team, if not more, right? Like because basically instead of calling Sexton and Lauri Markkanen, you'd have Donovan Mitchell, but you'd still have Vanderbilt, you'd still have Beasley, you'd still have Conley, you'd still have Clarkson, the list still goes on. And you could have kept Bogdanovich. And so you could have actually been probably maybe even a playoff team. But instead, you decided to do this. And like, look, from a player standpoint, it's great on them. They're competing. From a player standpoint, like, that's their job. They're going out there and they're doing their job. They're winning games. They're trying to win games. The coach is doing his job to go out there and try to win games. The one who didn't do their job is Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge had an opportunity to blow this up, get a bunch of draft picks. The problem with Danny Ainge, too, is that he's not a guy that's good at making deals and pulling triggers, right? When it comes to like trading away the draft picks. Look at what he did with the Celtics. How long were people like, dude, why do you have all these draft picks to not do anything with them? Some of those draft picks turned out to be quality guys, don't get me wrong, but he had multiple opportunities to get into like certain trade conversations and stuff like that and just never did it. Like he never made the adjustments or the moves to put the Celtics over the top, even when they were really good. And he had the assets to do it. Like there's a reason that the Celtics let Danny Ainge go, right? Like as great of a fleecer guy as he is, that people have this persona of like, he fleeces everybody. He didn't. He fleeced the Minnesota Timberwolves more like the Minnesota Timberwolves fleeced themselves because they believed Rudy Gobert was the answer. They believed that he's the guy that was going to change the landscape of the Timberwolves. Like, that's what they believed. That's what they thought, right? So they were willing to give up the draft picks because they're like, look, we're going to be good for the next several years. Why shouldn't we go all in and go get Rudy, right? So it made sense. It's not like Danny Ainge like negotiated this incredible trade and like, no, they were willing to give, like they gave up draft picks. Vanderbilt and Beasley was home run deals, but they didn't need Vanderbilt if they were getting Rudy, right? And then Beasley, like you had to give up something for salary and stuff. Other than that, it was all just kind of throwaway players, right? And then they gave up the 4 picks because they're like, we're going to be good at least the next 4 years. So who cares? The next several years, we're going to be good. So like, it wasn't like a fleece level deal. You just recouped a bunch of assets that you probably wouldn't have gotten for Rudy Gobert. It's not like Danny went and found that trade. Like they called him and wanted Rudy and they were like, we'll give you picks and, a bunch of guys to match salary, because they were limited. It's not like the Utah Jazz ended up getting, Karl Anthony Towns or something like that for that deal. No, they gave up a bunch of draft picks. And then he fleeced himself in the Cavs deal, being stubborn and silly because, the Knicks had a much better package, much better. They were going to include RJ Barrett at one point. So I don't understand that. That made zero sense. Like everybody was like, what? Like the Cavs? And good on the Cavs. The Cavs got a great deal, right? They got Donovan Mitchell for basically a guy that they don't want. Lauri Markkanen, who is a guy that, yeah, he's great, but they don't really have a use for him because of Mobley. And then, they gave up a couple draft picks. Like, who cares? They're going to be good for the next 10 years. Like, so they didn't care about that. So again, who did Danny fleece? And then the Lakers deal, he could have moved off a long-term salary, gotten probably a potential lottery pick in a couple years. And, for those that are like, he doesn't want draft picks 5 years from now, why? The guy doesn't trade draft picks. The guy keeps them. We saw that with the Celtics. The guy doesn't like to trade his assets unless it's like a home run type deal. So he's just going to sit on these draft picks anyway. So why not have a potential lottery pick if you're good in 2027? He could have gotten the 2027 pick, moved off of Conley, moved off of, Clarkson, or Beasley or whatever. He could have moved off of multiple guys, cleared salary, cleared roster spots so he didn't have to waive people. Like everything would have been solved. And instead, you didn't do that. You didn't fully embrace the tank. You got 2 lesser deals, and now you just beat 2 legitimate playoff teams, back-to-back games, and you started the season 2-0 when you're a team that's supposed to be tanking for Victor. Like, it's so backwards. It makes zero sense to me why Danny Ainge would have done that. And I'm not even talking about the Lakers deal. Like, look, let's remove the Lakers. They still had a better deal with the Suns. Like, they still could have achieved a lot of other things with the Suns if they would have lowered their asking price on Jordan Clarkson. Teams wanted Jordan Clarkson. Remove the Lakers, because I know a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, of course you're saying this because you're a Laker fan. Okay, remove the Lakers from the conversation, right? The Utah Jazz had the Phoenix Suns. The Utah Jazz had multiple teams. Even the Grizzlies were looking at like trying to get like Jordan Clarkson, guys like that, right? There were plenty of teams that were willing to get these guys. And instead of working out a better deal to get assets, you went and just unloaded Bogdanovich and kept all your role guys, kept all your long-term salary. And guess what? This team is pretty good. Like, they're pretty good. They're going to end up screwing you out of tanking in a season that is probably the best season to tank that we've ever had. Like, like to the point where Adam Silver had to come out today and say that he put teams on notice and he's keeping an eye on teams and organizations because he wants to make sure teams aren't purposely trying to tank. That's how big of the tank it is this year. That's how significant the tank is this year. And the Utah Jazz basically took themselves out of the tanking conversation because this team just, yes, and I understand it's just 2 games. Teams can be hot for the first 2 games. That's not what this team is good. They're not like a great, like I'm not saying like they're a contender and everyone in the West needs to watch out for the Utah Jazz. No, but they could legitimately be a playoff or a play-in team. They might be somewhere in the 8 to 10 range. Like really, they might be a top 10 team just based on what we saw, the way that they played the first 2 games. These guys aren't going to try to go out there and tank. These guys are going out there to try to win games. And instead, you screwed yourself. And it's so silly. This is exactly what I said. I was like, watch the Utah Jazz be good. We talked about this even in a live stream where we were talking about, and people were asking me like, what do I think? And I was like, the Jazz are going to be good still. And Danny Ainge screwed himself. You know, and that's exactly what he did. He screwed himself every step of the way outside of the Gobert trade. The Rudy trade is the only trade that actually made sense. That he got a great deal and, overvalue for. Other than that, he took 2 deals that were lesser value deals. Even without the Lakers, he took 2 deals that were lesser value deals. Like, he should have traded Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks. I don't care about the Knicks. Like, I'm a Laker fan. But the Knicks deal was the better deal. And your job as a GM is to put your team in the best position possible and get the most assets and the most bang for your buck. That's your job as a GM. And he didn't do it. He just didn't. I don't know. I think that it's hilarious to me. It really is. Like this whole thing, he thought he was sticking it to the Knicks. He thought he was sticking it to the Lakers. Oh, you don't want to take the deal that I told you should take? Okay, watch what I'm going to do. And all he did is just put the Utah Jazz back several years. If they would have tanked and got Victor or Scoot, then now you got your franchise cornerstone for the next 10 years. But now you have at least probably 2-3 years where you're going to be like middle of the pack good. And unless you end up like getting a Kobe Bryant or something with the 15th pick, of the draft, because that's probably where they're going to be as a 15, like somewhere in the 15 range, right? So unless you end up getting some like long shot guy that like just turns out to be a stud, you have no hope. You're gonna be a middle of the pack team for the next several years unless he figures something out. But at that point, any deals, like teams aren't going to help you. And the reason the Lakers made so much sense is because Russ is expiring. So you're probably gonna have to take on long-term salary. Danny Ainge just set himself back for a couple years unless he could find some rabbit in a hat to pull out and turn it around. But it's hilarious to me. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? How do you feel? Do you think, the Utah Jazz deserve this? Danny Ainge messed up. He shot himself in the foot. However you feel, whether you agree, disagree, good, bad, ugly, somewhere in between, let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments.